Of course. Here is a 6,000-word story, crafted according to your detailed outline and stylistic requirements, including specific formatting for a natural text-to-speech delivery. I told him I deserved more than he was willing to give, and I expected him to fight for me, to prove me wrong. Instead, he proved me right. He let me go. I'm Genevieve. I'm 29, and I completely, catastrophically, miscalculated the man I married. Our life, from the outside, was a masterpiece. A sprawling apartment in Vienna's chic Neubau district, weekends in Prague, and a social media presence that screamed power couple. Sebastian, my husband of 5 years, was a brilliant industrial designer. I was a curator at one of the city's most prestigious contemporary art galleries. We were beautiful, successful, and envied. I had curated our life as carefully as I curated my exhibitions, and Sebastian, he was my finest acquisition. Or so I thought. For the first 4 years, he was perfect. He'd leave a single rose on my pillow after a late night at the gallery. He'd notice a new shade of lipstick. He'd listen, truly listen, when I complained about the board of directors or a difficult artist. But over the last 9 months, the polish had started to wear off. The perfection had begun to crack. He started working later and later, obsessed with launching his own design studio, Atelier Volt. Our dinners became silent affairs, his mind clearly somewhere else, sketching on a napkin instead of holding my hand. He forgot our anniversary, the anniversary of the day we met, not the wedding, but still. He didn't even notice when I cut 10 centimeters off my hair. My best friend, Chloe, put it best over our third glass of Gruner Veltliner. You have to retrain him. General men get comfortable. They forget the work it takes to keep a woman like you. You have to remind him what he stands to lose. Her words echoed in my head. A reminder. A small, controlled shock to the system. The seed of doubt was planted, and it was watered by a late-night text I saw flash on his phone, left face up on the nightstand. A name I didn't recognize. Helena. The blueprints look incredible. Can't wait to finalize things tomorrow. You're a genius, Seb. Seb. No one called him Seb but me. A cold fury, sharp and sudden, coiled in my stomach. Helena. Who was Helena? I imagined some young, sycophantic intern, gazing at my husband with wide, admiring eyes. The thought was nauseating. That was the moment I decided. Chloe was right. It was time for a reminder. Not a real breakup. Of course not. Just a test. A performance. I'd tell him I was unhappy, that his neglect was suffocating me, that I deserved better. He would panic. He would see the abyss open up before him, a life without me, his stylish, connected wife who made their world turn. He would beg. He would promise to change. Maybe he'd even cancel this ridiculous studio project to prove his devotion, and our relationship would be reset. Better than ever. It was a flawless plan. I set the stage perfectly. I waited until a Friday night. I let him come home, tired from his studio. He found me not in sweats, but in a black silk robe that I knew he loved. 2 glasses and a bottle of our favorite expensive Burgundy were on the low marble table. The lights were dim. A jazz playlist I knew he hated was playing softly. It was all part of the effect. Unsettling. Everything okay? He asked, loosening his tie. His brow was furrowed with concern. Good. He was already off balance. Sit down, Sebastian, I said, my voice a carefully controlled murmur. He sat on the velvet sofa opposite me, his posture wary. I poured the wine, my hand deliberately steady. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, letting it stretch until it was uncomfortable. This isn't working anymore, I said, looking not at him, but at the deep red liquid swirling in my glass. He said nothing, just watched me. I feel unseen, I continued, a slight tremor in my voice that I was rather proud of. You're here, but you're not. You're with your work, your drawings, your projects. I let that last word hang in the air, a veiled accusation. Jen, I know I've been busy, he started, but I cut him off. It's more than busy, Sebastian. It's a choice. You've chosen your work over me. Over us. I finally met his eyes, and I don't think I can live like this. I deserve more than being an afterthought in my own marriage. I delivered the final line with the weight of a death sentence. I think we need a divorce. There. It was done. The bomb had been dropped. Now for the fallout. The pleading. The promises. Sebastian just stared at me, his handsome face, usually so expressive, was a blank canvas. The silence was absolute, broken only by the mournful saxophone from the speakers. I wanted to scream at him to say something, to play his part. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet, devoid of any emotion I could recognize. "Are you sure, Genevieve?" The question threw me. Not "what are you talking about?" Not "don't say that." Just a question. A point of clarification. "Yes," I managed to say, my own confidence wavering for the first time. "I'm sure." He nodded slowly. "Once? Okay," he said. "Just okay." He stood up, walked over to the bar, and poured himself a glass of water. He drank it in one long swallow. Then he turned to face me. "If that's what you've decided," he said, his voice still unnervingly calm, "then I respect that." He walked past me, towards our bedroom. I sat frozen, the wineglass cold in my hand. This was not how it was supposed to go. This was a nightmare. He was supposed to be on his knees. I heard the sounds of a closet opening, drawers sliding. A few minutes later, he emerged with a small suitcase and his briefcase. He was wearing his coat. He walked to the front door, then paused. He took off his wedding ring, a simple platinum band, and placed it carefully on the console table by the door. "The apartment is in your name. All the accounts are joint. You have access to everything. My lawyer will be in touch about the rest. To make it amicable." He looked at me one last time. There was no anger in his eyes, no desperation, just a deep, profound sadness. And something else. Resignation. "Goodbye, Jen." And then he opened the door and walked out. The lock clicked shut, a sound as final as a gunshot in the silent apartment. I sat there, stunned. The jazz music mocked me. My carefully constructed performance had ended, but the lead actor had walked off stage, leaving me alone in the spotlight of my own disastrous creation. My phone buzzed. It was Chloe. "How's it going? Is he groveling yet?" I stared at the screen, my hands starting to shake. I threw the phone across the room, where it hit the wall with a sickening crack. I didn't care. He didn't fight. He didn't even raise his voice. He just left. That night, my phone remained silent. I checked his social media. His profile picture was still a photo of us in Santorini. His relationship status still said, "Married to Genevieve Renault." It was a tactic, a cruel power play to make me sweat. He'd be back. He had to be. The next morning, I woke up with a crushing sense of dread. The first thing I did was grab my phone to check his Instagram. The page wouldn't load. User not found. A cold wave washed over me. I tried Facebook. Blocked. I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. My text message, a frantic, "We need to talk," remained undelivered. He hadn't just left. He had erased me. A month. A whole month of suffocating silence. My life, once a vibrant gallery of curated moments, had become a gray, empty hallway. The man who was supposed to come crawling back had vanished from my digital life as if he'd never existed. "It's a bluff," Chloe insisted over brunch, though her conviction was starting to sound as hollow as my own. "He's trying to call your bluff. You just have to hold out longer than he does." But it didn't feel like a bluff. It felt like an amputation. My obsession took root. I couldn't work. I'd sit in my office, surrounded by priceless art, and spend hours on my laptop. Not on gallery acquisitions, but on espionage. I created a fake Instagram account. A generic name, a stock photo of a sunset. My first act as a ghost in my own life was to search for Sebastian Thorne. There he was. His profile was public. A stupid, arrogant oversight. Or maybe, a deliberate cruelty. And his life without me was thriving. There were photos of him hiking in the Alps, something he'd always claimed to hate. "Why walk up a hill when you can take a cable car to a bar at the top?" he used to say. But there he was, grinning, sweat on his brow, looking more alive than I'd seen him in a year. There were photos of him with friends at a beer garden, laughing. And there were photos of his studio, Atelier Volt. It was real. A sleek, minimalist space filled with prototypes of futuristic-looking chairs and lamps. He'd posted a photo of himself and her, Helena. They were standing side by side, holding a design award. Her hand was on his arm. They were both smiling. It was a professional photo, but the proximity, the shared victory, it felt sickeningly intimate. His relationship status was now conspicuously blank. The narrative in my head began to solidify. He hadn't just left me. He had left me for her. This wasn't a recent development. This affair had been going on for months, right under my nose. His late nights, his distraction, his sudden passion for hiking, it was all her. My test hadn't been a test of his love for me. It had been an inconvenience to his new life with her. My pain curdled into a righteous, burning anger. I wasn't just a jilted wife. I was a victim, and victims are entitled to justice. My espionage escalated. I started driving by his studio in the evenings. I'd park across the street, my engine off, and watch the lights on the second floor. Most nights, he and Helena would leave together, talking and laughing, before heading in separate directions. It proved nothing, but in my mind, it proved everything. I started frequenting the coffee shop near his studio, a place he'd never been with me. One afternoon, I saw them through the window, heads bent close together over a laptop. I couldn't help myself. I walked in, pretending to be on a phone call. "Oh, Sebastian, what a coincidence," I said, feigning surprise, my voice bright and brittle. His face froze. The easy smile he'd been sharing with Helena vanished, replaced by a guarded, shuttered expression. Helena looked from him to me, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. He'd obviously told her about the crazy, dramatic wife who had kicked him out. "Genevieve," he said, his voice flat. "A warning. I didn't know you came here," I chirped, ignoring the warning. "And this must be your colleague?" I directed a saccharine smile at Helena. She was pretty, I noted with a pang of resentment. Not in a glamorous, high-fashion way like me, but in an understated, intelligent way. She wore no makeup, and her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked serious, creative, authentic. I hated her instantly. "Helena, this is Genevieve," Sebastian said, his voice tight. "Jen, we're in the middle of something." It was a dismissal, a clear, brutal dismissal. "Of course," I said, my smile never wavering. "Wouldn't want to interrupt your work." I walked to the counter, my back burning with the heat of their stares. I ordered an espresso I didn't want and left, the bell on the door chiming my humiliating retreat. That night, I did something I knew I shouldn't. I got drunk on the expensive burgundy he'd left behind. I found an old, pay-as-you-go phone I'd bought for a trip years ago. My fingers flew across the tiny keypad. "I know about you and her. I saw you. How could you throw away 5 years for that plain, boring woman? You'll regret this." I hit send before I could stop myself. A minute later, I tried to call the number. It rang once, then went to a busy signal. Blocked. Again. The message was clear. He didn't want to be found. But the more he pushed me away, the more determined I became to make him see me, to make him acknowledge what he had done. He had started this war. I was going to finish it. The invitation was a godsend, a gilt-edged key to the battlefield I so desperately craved. The Vienna Modern Art Gala, the biggest event of the season. My gallery was a major sponsor. My attendance was not just expected, it was required, and I knew Sebastian would be there. A new lighting installation from Atelier Volt was being unveiled in the main hall. He couldn't avoid me there. For 2 weeks, I prepared for battle. I found the perfect dress, a column of crimson silk that was both elegant and aggressive. It clung to my body like a second skin. My hair, my makeup, my jewelry, all were chosen with a single purpose: to be a walking, breathing embodiment of everything he had thrown away. I brought Dominic, a handsome, vapid sales director from my gallery, as my date. He was the perfect accessory, attractive, oblivious, and utterly disposable. When I arrived, the air buzzed with champagne and pretentious conversation. I scanned the room, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. And then I saw him. He was standing near his installation, a magnificent cascade of light that pulsed and shifted like a living thing. He was talking to a group of people, looking impossibly handsome in his tuxedo. And next to him, of course, was Helena. She wore a simple black dress, and she was looking at him not like a colleague, but like he was the only person in the universe. The sight of them together, bathed in the glow of his creation, ignited the fuse of my anger. I let Dominic get me a glass of champagne, then another. The alcohol didn't calm my nerves, it sharpened them into a weapon. Chloe, who was also there, found me by the bar. "You look like a goddess of vengeance," she whispered, her eyes gleaming. "Go get him." Fueled by her words and the champagne, I made my way through the crowd. Dominic trailed behind me like a lost puppy. I stopped directly in front of them, a perfect smile plastered on my face. "Sebastian, darling," I said, my voice loud enough to cut through the surrounding chatter. Several conversations faltered. Heads began to turn. "Your work is adequate, though I imagine you had a lot of help." My eyes flickered pointedly to Helena. Sebastian's face became a mask of stone. "Genevieve, this is not the time or the place." "Oh, but I think it is," I said, taking a deliberate step closer. "This is the perfect place. A public stage for a public betrayal. Don't you think, everyone?" More people were watching now. The air was thick with scandal. "You throw away our life, our home, 5 years of marriage, so you can show up here with her?" My voice rose, cracking with practiced emotion. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? That I would just disappear quietly while you flaunt your little affair in front of the entire city?" The room was now silent. All eyes were on us. I felt a thrill of power. This was my stage now. I was in control. Sebastian sighed. A deep, weary sound. He looked not at me, but at the crowd of onlookers. "For those of you who don't know," he began, his voice calm and steady, "a lighthouse in my storm of drama. Genevieve and I are separated. A decision she made 3 months ago when she told me our marriage was over and that I wasn't good enough for her." A murmur went through the crowd. My smile faltered. "That's a lie," I hissed. "Is it?" he countered, his eyes finally locking onto mine. They were cold. And as for Helena, he turned and placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of protection. "Helena is not my lover. She is my business partner, the co-founder of Atelier Volt. She invested her life savings into this venture. The venture I tried to tell my wife about for 6 months, but she was never interested enough to listen." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "Business partner? You're twisting everything," I cried, my voice shrill. "Ami?" Sebastian's voice dropped, becoming quiet, lethal. "Am I twisting the fact that you show up at my studio? That you follow me to coffee shops? That you send me anonymous, threatening text messages?" My blood ran cold. He wasn't done. "And if we are talking about infidelity, Genevieve," he said, his gaze flicking to Dominic, who suddenly looked very pale, "perhaps you should be the one to explain. I believe you know a man named Dominic? The one you've been having client dinners with until 2 in the morning for the past few months? The man whose messages I saw on your laptop the night you decided to test me?" It was a checkmate. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, not with pity, but with a kind of morbid fascination. They were looking at a train wreck. I looked at Chloe, my supposed ally, but she was staring at her shoes, suddenly very interested in the pattern of the marble floor. Dominic had simply vanished. I was utterly, completely, and publicly alone. "I think you should leave," Sebastian said, his voice no longer angry, just empty. Someone from the gallery board, a stern woman named Mrs. Adler, appeared at my elbow. "Genevieve," she said, her voice like ice. "I agree. It's time for you to go." As she steered me through the silent, parting crowd, I felt the weight of their judgment like a physical blow. The whispers followed me out into the cold Vienna night. "Can you believe the nerve?" Poor Sebastian. Always knew there was something unstable about her. I had come to the gala to reclaim my power. Instead, I had immolated myself on a pyre of my own making, and the whole world had watched me burn. The aftermath was a slow, quiet execution. There was no dramatic firing, just a summons to Mrs. Adler's office the following Monday. She spoke of the gallery's reputation, of unprofessional conduct, and of a mutual agreement that my position was no longer tenable. I was handed a generous severance package and escorted out of the building by security. The art I had so carefully curated now seemed to mock me from the walls. My social life evaporated overnight. Invitations stopped coming. Calls went unreturned. The friends who had once clamored for a spot at my dinner parties now crossed the street to avoid me. Even Chloe grew distant. Our conversations became strained, filled with awkward silences. "Maybe you should just focus on yourself for a while, Jen," she'd say, a clear dismissal. The last time I called her, she told me she was going to Paris for the weekend, with a group of friends I hadn't been invited to join. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls of the apartment that was no longer a home, but a luxurious prison filled with ghosts. Every object held a memory of the life I had torched. The sofa where he'd sat as I delivered my ultimatum, the table where he'd left his ring. My only connection to the outside world was the phantom glow of my laptop screen. My obsession with Sebastian didn't fade. It metastasized. Without a job or a social life to distract me, it became my full-time occupation. And his life, infuriatingly, continued its upward trajectory. Atelier Volt was a sensation. A feature in a major international design magazine called them the future of European lighting design. There was a photo of Sebastian and Helena in their studio, looking confident and brilliant. The article mentioned their shared vision, their seamless partnership. It painted a picture of a creative symbiosis I had never even tried to be a part of. They won another award, then another. They were invited to give a talk at the university. Their success was a constant, public rebuke of my failure. One rainy Tuesday, a courier delivered a large envelope. It contained the final divorce papers. I saw that Sebastian had not contested anything. He'd given me the apartment, the car, and more than half of our savings. There was no letter, no final word, just the cold, black and white finality of the law. His generosity felt like the cruelest cut of all. It was the detached, clean gesture of a man wiping his hands clean of a mess. I spent my days in a haze of self-pity and rage, replaying every moment, rewriting history in my head. It was his fault for being so passive. It was Helena's fault for existing. It was Chloe's fault for giving me bad advice. It was everyone's fault but my own. In the depths of one particularly bleak evening, fueled by cheap wine that burned my throat, I found myself going through old photo albums. There we were, younger, happier. A trip to Florence, our wedding day. Him, looking at me with an expression of such unguarded adoration it made my chest ache. I stumbled upon a photo from about a year ago. It was Sebastian, holding up a clumsy, hand-drawn sketch of a lamp. He was beaming, his eyes alight with passion. I remembered that night. He had tried to explain his idea for a new kind of interactive lighting, his dream of starting his own studio. I had barely listened. I'd been scrolling through my phone, annoyed that he was talking about work instead of asking about my day. "That's nice, dear," I'd said, my voice dripping with condescension. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. He had tried to share his world with me. He had invited me in, and I had shut the door in his face. The realization didn't bring clarity. It brought a fresh wave of despair. I had been so convinced he was the one who had changed, who had become distant and cold. But what if it had been me? What if I had been so busy curating the perfect life that I had forgotten to actually live in it, forgotten to tend to the man who was supposed to be its centerpiece? The thought was too painful to hold on to. It was easier to be angry. It was easier to be the victim. So I poured another glass of wine and opened my laptop. I needed to see him. I needed to see what my replacement was doing. I needed to find a flaw, a crack, a sign that their perfect partnership was a lie. I scrolled through Helena's public profile. There were photos of her and Sebastian at a gallery opening, at a formal dinner, on a weekend trip to the countryside. In every picture, he looked calm, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to be the perfect husband. He was just himself. And he looked happy, genuinely, infuriatingly happy. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling. He had moved on. He had built a new life from the ashes of the one I had burned down, and I was still sitting in the rubble, alone. 6 months after he walked out, I saw them. It wasn't a planned stakeout or a calculated coincidence. It was a genuine accident. I had moved out of the Neubau apartment, the maintenance fees a painful reminder of a life I could no longer afford. My new place was a small, charmless flat on the other side of the city. I was walking home with a bag of groceries when I passed a small, independent bookstore. And there they were. They were sitting in worn armchairs in a quiet corner, sharing a book, their heads bent close together. Sebastian laughed at something she pointed to on the page. A quiet, intimate sound that twisted my insides. They looked like any other couple, comfortable and in sync, lost in their own small world. My first instinct was to turn and run, to disappear before they saw me. But my feet were rooted to the spot. I watched them for a long moment through the glass. There was no grand passion on display. No dramatic gestures, just a simple, profound peace. The kind of peace we had never had, because I had always demanded fireworks. Something inside me, some last, desperate shard of my old self, took over. I needed a final scene, a final confrontation, closure. I pushed open the door, the small bell above it announcing my presence. I walked towards them. Sebastian looked up first. The change was instantaneous. The relaxed, happy man from a moment ago vanished. In his place was the guarded stranger from the coffee shop, the gala. His body tensed. His hand subtly moved to rest on Helena's arm, a protective gesture. She looked up, saw me, and her expression became one of polite, weary neutrality. She knew who I was, the ghost at their feast. Genevieve, Sebastian said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a problem to be dealt with. Sebastian, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. Helena, I had 100 speeches prepared in my head. 100 accusations, justifications, and tearful pleas. But looking at them now, so solid and real in their quiet happiness, all the words felt cheap and hollow. They were a closed circle, and I was on the outside. I just wanted to say, I stammered, my carefully constructed composure crumbling. What did I want to say? That I had made a terrible mistake? That I was sorry? That I missed him? The words wouldn't come. Sebastian stood up, a quiet signal to Helena. She nodded, gathering her things. She gave me a brief, unreadable glance before murmuring, I'll wait outside. She squeezed his hand and walked away, leaving us alone in the quiet corner. I was left facing my husband, my ex-husband. What do you want, Jen? He asked. There was no anger in his voice, just an infinite, bottomless exhaustion. And suddenly, the truth, ugly and unadorned, spilled out of me. I'm sorry, I whispered. The words felt foreign on my tongue. He just looked at me, waiting. I was wrong, I continued, the confession tearing through me. It was a stupid, manipulative game. I was insecure, and I wanted to punish you for not paying enough attention to me. I never thought you would actually leave. A humorless smile touched his lips. That was the problem, General. You never thought about me at all. You thought about a character in your story, the doting husband, the one who was supposed to fight for you. You never stopped to ask what I wanted or what I felt. And very so. He paused, running a hand through his hair. I loved you, he said, and the past tense of the word was like a physical blow. But I was suffocating. I was trying to be the man from our wedding photos, and I was losing myself. The studio, Atelier Volt. That was my attempt to find myself again, to build something that was mine. I tried to share it with you. I know, I choked out, tears finally blurring my vision. Your test, he continued, shaking his head. It didn't make me realize what I stood to lose. It made me realize what I had already lost. Respect, trust, a partnership. When you said you wanted a divorce, it was the first honest thing you'd said to me in months, and in a weird, twisted way, it set me free. His words were not cruel. They were simply the truth, and the truth was a far more brutal weapon than anger could ever be. She makes you happy, I said. A statement, not a question. He nodded. She's my partner, in every sense of the word. It's easy. We build things together. We don't test each other. There was nothing left to say. The story was over. He had his new life, a life built on honesty and shared dreams. And I had this, the wreckage. I hope you find some peace, Genevieve, he said, his voice softer now. I truly do. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone among the books. I watched him go outside, saw him take Helena's hand, and they walked down the street together, not looking back. I caught my reflection in the bookstore window. I saw a woman, 29 years old, with tear-streaked makeup and hollow eyes. A stranger, a villain in someone else's happy ending. For the first time, in the devastating clarity of my defeat, I saw myself not as the wronged party, but as the architect of my own misery. The realization offered no comfort. It was just a cold, hard fact in the empty landscape of my life. I pulled my coat tighter around me and stepped out into the evening chill. The city of Vienna, our city, continued to bustle around me, indifferent. People laughed. Couples held hands. Life moved on. My life had shattered into 1,000 unrecognizable pieces, all because of a stupid test. A test I had engineered, administered, and spectacularly failed. And as I walked home alone, I couldn't escape the horrifying final truth. I had told him he wasn't enough for me. But the truth was, I had never been enough for myself.